We will start with the latest development, obviously, with President Trump commenting on possible U.S. involvement in Normandy format. Yesterday, answering the VOA question, he said if Ukraine wants, he would be willing to be involved. Did Ukraine made official request for U.S. or maybe Britain, or maybe you heard about it, to participate in Normandy format in high-level discussion?
So President Zelensky and others in the Ukrainian government have said that if there are not results coming out of the current Normandy format, the Normandy 4, then they want results, and so they would consider asking the United States, the UK, to participate in the Normandy Forum. So it is not a formal request yet, as I understand it. There is a strong interest on the part of the Ukrainian government, President Zelensky in particular, to move forward on this process toward peace. There have been 5 years of work on Minsk and 5 years of work on Normandy. And if it can show results, great. If it doesn't show results, then I imagine there could be some request for other participation, like the Americans and the British.
The President Zelensky lately said that the Normandy format can actually, the discussion on Normandy format can happen by the end of September. Don't you think that it would be effective to have U.S. and Britain at this round of discussions?
So the United States and Britain are very interested in helping all the parties, but in particular Ukraine, find a peace, find a peaceful solution to Donbass. So when the request comes, we'll be interested. John Bolton was out here. Ambassador Bolton was in Kyiv and had this very conversation. And he said the same thing that others have said, which is if people would like us to join, if the Ukrainians would like us to join, we're interested in examining that possibility.
French President Macron and President Trump expressed the possibility of Russia joining, inviting Russia back to G7. There is discussion of normalization of Russia Europe-US relationship. What could and what should be the condition for this normalization to happen?
Probably everyone would like to see some kind of normalization if the reason for the abnormalization is solved. That is, the reason that the Russians were disinvited from the G8, were kicked out of the G8, same reason they were disinvited from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, is they invaded Crimea. They invaded Ukraine, and they sent their troops into Donbass. And they were then seen to be unwilling to play by any normal rules of how states deal with each other. They violated the sovereignty of Ukraine. They armed invasion. And they were kicked out of the G8, and they were kicked out of PACE. If the Russians leave Donbass, and if the Russians leave Crimea, then they will have removed the problem that caused them to be kicked out of those two organizations. And in that case, they would be fine to come back into the G7, G8.
But it doesn't look that Russia is willing to get out, at least from Crimea. There was a local election in Russia that happened in Crimea just this weekend. Do you think that Russia is, or do you hear the signs that Russia is willing to fulfill the Minsk agreement? And is there any, or is there any signs that Russia actually hoping for more concession from Ukraine?
I think there are signs that the Russians, in particular the Kremlin, would like to get out of Donbass. I think there are signs that the economic burden that the Russians are paying, not just by sanctions, but including sanctions. I think sanctions are having a real effect on Russians, on Russian individuals, and Russian economy more broadly. I think the sanctions are having an effect, but the burden that the Russian government and the Russian people are paying applies to their economy, and the burden is from keeping their troops in Donbass, maintaining services as much as they have in Donbass and in Crimea. The cost to the Russians of Donbass and Crimea, added to the costs of sanctions, lead me to think that they would like to get out of Donbass. So if we maintain those sanctions, have the conversation in whatever format. The conversation seems to be moving pretty well between President Zelensky and President Putin. If that format works, that's a great format. Those are the two people that need to agree to get the Russians out of Donbass and eventually the Russians out of Crimea.
Would it be the position of United States if you will be invited to Normandy format? Tell me all those conditions. What would be the position of United States if you will be invited to Normandy format, to participate in Normandy format?
The United States' view all along is that Ukraine is sovereign. Ukraine has internationally recognized borders. That sovereignty and those borders must be recognized in any solution, in any agreement. Those internationally recognized borders have been recognized since Ukraine was independent, became independent. And those are the borders. And that's the condition, sovereignty and Ukrainian control over its own borders.
Let's go back to Washington and talk about the issues of White House and President Trump. Congress just announced a special commission to investigate the possible involvement of President lawyer Giuliani and President Trump in attempt to pushing Ukrainians to investigate Biden dealings in Ukraine. Did you get, and they put the deadline for requests September 16 of this month, did you as the embassy received any requests from the legislative body of United States to give information or any other documents to the Congress?
We have not. We have not. Now, I understand that these three committees in the House of Representatives have decided to undertake these investigations, and I read the same story that they are eager to get information. We have not received yet any such requests.
Is there any, and what is the status of U.S.-Ukraine military cooperation at this point of time?
The status of U.S.-Ukraine military cooperation is very strong. It's never been stronger. This administration has provided more security assistance in more ways, including lethal weapons, than at any time in the past. The previous administration didn't provide lethal weapons. This administration has. The strong support on training, the strong support on equipment, and strong support on weapons. This is our current policy. There is a review that is taking place right now. The status of that review, it must be nearly done. We've heard that the people who are reviewing have made their recommendations to the White House, and so we're waiting for the conclusion of that review.
And one more question about President Zelensky and President Trump future meeting. What United States is hoping for at this meeting, and basically, and what hoping from, and that Ukraine has to do, and maybe United States have some inner relationship with Ukraine, something specific that you wanted to accomplish.
So the one thing that we want to have happen with this meeting is that President Trump and President Zelensky get to know each other. I mean, this is important for leaders to have a personal relationship. And one can speculate that this could be a very good relationship, just looking at the two personalities, that they might fit fine. So that's that important thing. There are also specific issues that President Trump, President Zelensky want to talk about. We've talked about the security assistance. This is really important for both sides. It's important for the United States to be able to support Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression. So that's an important component that will certainly be discussed in this. President Zelensky has made that his top priority, and his second priority has been fighting. He even says he wants to defeat corruption. That's important for Ukraine, it's important for Europe, it's important for the United States that Ukraine defeat corruption, and President Zelensky has indicated that's his second priority after the war. And I'm sure that President Trump is interested in that second fight as well. He's interested in supporting Ukraine against the Russians. He's also interested in supporting Ukraine in its fight and its, hopefully, defeat of corruption.
And when is the meeting scheduled?
So they are in the process of scheduling it now. They will both be in New York for the UN General Assembly, and that will take place in 2 weeks. President Trump has meetings that he's scheduling. President Zelensky has meetings he's scheduling. It's a matter of making those schedules fit.